Most people think blood pressure is simple. You feel dizzy, you feel flushed, maybe your heart pounds a little. That's when you know something is wrong. And if none of that is happening, you're fine. The problem is that assumption has cost people their lives. I've been in operating rooms with patients who were walking their neighborhoods 3 days earlier. No warning, no symptom that made them pick up the phone and call anyone. They felt completely normal right up until they weren't. Blood pressure doesn't negotiate. It doesn't telegraph its intentions. And after 60, it starts operating by a completely different set of rules than anything your body followed in its younger decades. Rules that your standard doctor's visit is simply not designed to catch. What I want to talk about today is something most cardiologists don't spend enough time explaining to their patients. Not the medication, not the dietary sodium lecture you've already heard 12 times. Something more specific, more overlooked, and frankly, more urgent. What happens inside your cardiovascular system between 10 at night and 6 in the morning, and why what you drink in those final hours before bed might be doing more damage than anything you ate for lunch. Let's start with something your body is supposed to do every single night, automatically, without you thinking about it. Under healthy conditions, as you transition into sleep, your blood pressure descends. We're talking a drop of roughly 10 to 20% below your daytime baseline. That descent isn't cosmetic. It's your body's scheduled maintenance window, the period during which your heart muscle recovers, your arterial walls decompress, your kidneys regulate fluid and process metabolic waste. Every organ involved in keeping you alive uses that pressure window to do repair work. Think of it less like rest and more like the overnight crew that comes in after the building closes and fixes everything before morning. Now, here's where age changes the equation in ways most people simply aren't told. After 60, a combination of gradual arterial stiffening, autonomic nervous system changes, and altered hormonal rhythms begins to interfere with that overnight drop. The system that orchestrates the descent starts losing precision. Signals that once fired cleanly begin to misfire. And for a large number of older adults, we'll get to the specific numbers shortly, the pressure doesn't drop at night. It stays elevated, or worse, it actually climbs. You wake up the next morning, you feel vaguely tired, maybe foggy, maybe your head feels heavier than it should for someone who slept 7 hours. You chalk it up to age, to weather, to sleeping on the wrong pillow. You never once consider that your cardiovascular system spent the previous 8 hours under pressure it was never supposed to sustain at 3 in the morning. And because your morning reading looks acceptable, nobody catches it. Let me give you a concrete picture. Say a man comes into my clinic, blood pressure 118/76. His numbers look excellent. His doctor is pleased. I send him home with a 24-hour monitoring device strapped to his arm. He makes dinner, watches television, goes to bed around 10:30. By 1 in the morning, while he's in deep sleep, his pressure has climbed to 161/99. That's not borderline. That's a hypertensive crisis occurring in a man who believed he was perfectly managed. Nobody told him because nobody looked. This happens for several compounding reasons. His medication was taken at 7 in the morning. 12 hours later, its effectiveness has significantly dropped. His stress hormones, which should follow a downward curve at night, are instead spiking irregularly because his sleep has been fragmenting in short bursts he doesn't remember. Each fragmentation is a micro-stress event. Each one triggers a brief surge in his sympathetic nervous system. Multiply that by dozens of times per night across months and years, and you begin to understand the mechanism behind silent, accumulating cardiovascular damage that never announces itself. Clinically, we call these patients non-dippers, the ones whose blood pressure refuses to descend at night. And the statistic I want you to actually absorb, not just hear, but absorb, is this. More than half of adults over 65 fall into this category, 50% or more. Not a fringe case, not rare, the majority. And those individuals carry a cardiovascular mortality risk 3 times higher than patients with identical daytime readings who do have the normal nighttime drop. Same daytime number, same medication, same diet, 3 times the risk from what happens during the hours when everyone assumes the body is simply resting. Then there's the group beyond non-dippers, reverse dippers, people whose pressure is measurably higher during sleep than while they're awake. For these individuals, the stroke risk multiplier climbs to 4, sometimes 5 times that of normal dippers. And they walk into a clinic looking completely fine because they feel completely fine. Office readings tell you nothing about what that category looks like. Now I want to talk about what's already in your home that might be making this problem significantly worse, because some of it will genuinely surprise you, and some of it involves things people intentionally do before bed in the belief that they're helping themselves. The first one is licorice root. I raise this one specifically because of how it gets marketed. Calming, herbal, good for digestion, something you'd see on a shelf with soft packaging and words like gentle and natural. Licorice root contains a compound called glycyrrhizin, which blocks an enzyme in your kidneys that normally metabolizes cortisol. When that enzyme is suppressed, cortisol accumulates in your bloodstream. Elevated cortisol at night directly interferes with blood pressure regulation and contributes to nighttime surges. The compound stays active in your system for hours. You feel nothing. You just wake up exhausted with no explanation. And on packaging, licorice root hides under several names: glycyrrhiza, sweet root, DGL in some forms, or buried quietly inside phrases like natural flavoring in blended herbal teas. Check tonight, not tomorrow, tonight. The second is alcohol, and I want to be precise about the mechanism because the common understanding of this is wrong in an important way. Alcohol does lower blood pressure initially. That's real. The sedative effect is real. What most people don't account for is what happens 3 to 4 hours later, deep inside your sleep cycle, long after you'd stopped thinking about it. Your sympathetic nervous system, which was temporarily suppressed by the alcohol, overcorrects. It rebounds. Cortisol spikes, adrenaline surges. Your blood pressure can reach its highest point of the entire 24-hour cycle at 3 in the morning following an evening drink. Higher than during exercise, higher than during a stressful workday. The drink felt harmless. The rebound happens completely without your awareness, every time, without exception. The third hidden factor applies specifically to people on calcium channel blockers, amlodipine being among the most commonly prescribed. Grapefruit juice, even a small glass in the evening, inhibits the liver enzyme responsible for breaking down this medication. The drug accumulates beyond its intended concentration. What was calibrated to be a predictable, controlled dose becomes unpredictable. The risk is amplified overnight when no one is monitoring, when symptoms are difficult to interpret, even if they occur, and when there's no easy mechanism to respond. If you take amlodipine or any calcium channel blocker, grapefruit in the evening is not a minor dietary note. It's a contraindication. So now the obvious question: if standard office visits can't see nighttime blood pressure, how do you find out what yours is actually doing? The most important test you probably never requested is called ambulatory blood pressure monitoring, or ABPM. You wear a small automatic cuff for a full 24 hours while living completely normally. It takes readings every 30 minutes, including through the night. The data it generates is the only real window into whether you're a dipper, a non-dipper, or a reverse dipper. It's the clinical gold standard for exactly this question. Most adults over 65 have never worn one. Most doctors won't order it unless you request it by name. Write it down, ABPM. Ask for it specifically at your next visit. The second test is urine microalbumin. Your kidneys, under sustained pressure stress, begin leaking a protein called albumin into your urine in amounts too small to cause symptoms, but large enough to detect in a lab. Microalbumin in the urine is one of the earliest measurable signs of organ damage from chronic blood pressure elevation, appearing years before any visible decline in kidney function. It's the warning light that illuminates while there's still meaningful time to change the trajectory before the damage crosses into irreversibility. Standard blood panels don't capture this. You have to ask for it by name. The third test is oxidized LDL. You've heard of LDL cholesterol, the so-called bad one. But oxidized LDL is the degraded, structurally damaged form of that cholesterol, produced when arterial walls are under chronic oxidative stress, precisely the kind caused by sustained nighttime pressure elevation. It's a direct measure of vascular inflammation and arterial wall damage in progress. Standard cholesterol panels don't include it. Most people have never had it measured. Ask for it specifically. ABPM, urine microalbumin, oxidized LDL. Write those three down on a piece of paper right now and put it somewhere you will find it before your next appointment. Not in your phone, a physical piece of paper. That paper is your agenda. It will produce more useful clinical information than a dozen routine blood pressure snapshots taken in the 15 minutes before your doctor's next appointment. Now let's talk about what you can actually do about this. And I want to start with something so straightforward, it sounds like it can't possibly matter that much. The time of day you take your blood pressure medication. Most antihypertensives are taken in the morning. That's the convention most patients follow without question because it's what they were told when the prescription was first written. But the protective effect of most blood pressure medications is not a flat 24-hour coverage. It peaks within several hours of ingestion and declines steadily from there. If your pill enters your system at 7 in the morning, its protection is meaningfully reduced by the time midnight arrives, which is precisely the window when non-dippers and reverse dippers are most physiologically vulnerable. A major clinical trial called the Hygeia chronotherapy trial enrolled over 20,000 patients across 6 years, one of the largest cardiovascular outcome trials ever completed, and directly compared morning dosing against bedtime dosing for the same medications, same patients, same doses. The bedtime group saw a reduction of nearly 50% in heart attack, stroke, and cardiovascular death rates. Not from adding a new drug, not from increasing a dose, simply from changing the clock. The same medication taken at bedtime instead of sunrise cut the risk in half for the right patients. I must be absolutely clear here. Do not change your medication timing without first having a direct conversation with your doctor. Some medications, diuretics especially, are prescribed in the morning for specific physiological reasons, and switching those arbitrarily could cause serious problems. This is a conversation, not a self-directed experiment. But it is a conversation absolutely worth initiating. One question at your next appointment: should I be taking this at bedtime instead of the morning? Could meaningfully change your cardiovascular risk profile. That question takes 30 seconds to ask. Now I want to spend time on something that has genuine, replicated clinical evidence behind it, and that most people either dismiss too quickly or use incorrectly: hibiscus. Specifically, the dried calyces of Hibiscus sabdariffa, the deep red flowers used to make the vivid, tart tea you may know under several names depending on where you grew up. Hibiscus contains a class of compounds called anthocyanins, the same family of molecules responsible for the color depth in blueberries, blackberries, pomegranates, and red cabbage. These compounds are potent antioxidants that work directly against free radicals, the molecules responsible for oxidative damage to arterial walls and the degradation of LDL into its oxidized form. But hibiscus does something beyond antioxidant activity. It inhibits the angiotensin-converting enzyme, ACE, the same molecular target as a major category of prescription blood pressure medications. ACE inhibition reduces arterial constriction, eases pressure on the vascular walls, and directly supports lower blood pressure readings. Multiple independent clinical trials, not single studies, multiple replicated trials, have demonstrated that daily hibiscus consumption produces systolic blood pressure reductions of 8 to 14 millimeters of mercury in patients with mild to moderate hypertension who are not on medication. 8 to 14 points. That's not a placebo effect. That's a clinically meaningful reduction that would be considered significant in a drug trial. But here's where most people go wrong. They're not making it correctly, and therefore they're getting almost none of the benefit. A pale pink hibiscus tea made from a single tea bag steeped for 4 minutes in lukewarm water contains a fraction of the active compounds needed to produce any measurable effect. The preparation has to be specific. Use 10 grams of dried hibiscus flowers, not blended tea bags, not hibiscus-flavored products, actual dried flowers purchased from a reputable source. Heat your water to 90 degrees Celsius, just below boiling. Pour it over the flowers. Now steep for a minimum of 10 minutes, and ideally closer to 15. The extraction of anthocyanins requires time and the correct temperature. The final tea should be a deep, dark burgundy, closer to red wine than to pink lemonade. If you're looking at a pale or light pink liquid, it hasn't steeped long enough, and the active compounds haven't fully released. Keep steeping. 3 cups per day is the dosage represented in the clinical literature. But the cup that matters most for nighttime blood pressure is the one you drink in the evening, ideally 60 to 90 minutes before you go to sleep. That timing aligns the peak effect of the active compounds with the window when your pressure needs the most support. One important and non-negotiable point: if you're already on blood pressure medication, do not add hibiscus to your evening routine without telling your doctor first. Because hibiscus has genuine ACE inhibiting activity, combining it with prescription antihypertensives can produce an additive effect that drops your pressure lower than intended. This isn't me being overly cautious. This is a compound with real pharmacological activity that interacts with real drugs. Tell your doctor. It's a 15-second conversation and completely worth having. Let's bring this into focus with the 3 things you can actually do starting tonight. First, go to your tea cabinet right now. Not at the end of this video, right now while this is still in your mind, and read every label. Look for licorice root, glycyrrhiza, sweet root, or any tea listing natural flavoring without full ingredient transparency. If licorice root is present in anything you drink in the evening, that item leaves the evening shelf tonight. Move it to morning or remove it from the rotation entirely. Second, be direct with yourself about evening alcohol. Not judgmental, direct. Is it happening regularly? Is it occurring within 2 hours of when you typically go to sleep? If yes, understand clearly that the rebound pressure spike is occurring at 3 in the morning, regardless of whether you feel it. You don't have to eliminate it, but shifting it earlier, with dinner rather than as a wind-down ritual close to bedtime, meaningfully reduces the overnight rebound effect. Third, and this is the most important concrete action, write 3 things on a physical piece of paper: ABPM, urine microalbumin, oxidized LDL. Fold that paper. Place it with your insurance card, your medication list, wherever you keep the things you actually bring to medical appointments. That paper is your entire agenda for the next visit. Those 3 tests, taken together, create a clinical picture that no routine checkup has ever been designed to produce. They are widely available. They are not exotic or experimental. They will almost certainly never be ordered without you specifically requesting them by name. Here's the thing I want to leave you with, not as a warning, not as fear-based motivation, but as a simple truth that I've watched play out across a career in cardiac surgery. The cardiovascular system does not operate on a schedule that matches office hours. It works continuously, every second of every night, under conditions that nobody in your care team is currently observing, unless you make a specific effort to close that gap. The patients I've seen navigate this phase of life most successfully are not the ones who took the most medications or followed the strictest dietary protocols. They were the ones who walked into appointments with specific questions, who asked for tests by name, who had one more informed conversation than the average patient. That additional layer of engagement produced better data, which produced better decisions, which produced measurably better outcomes. You now have exactly what those patients had when they walked in. You know what ABPM is and why it matters. You know what microalbumin tells you about kidney stress that's already building before any other test catches it. You know what oxidized LDL reveals about arterial damage in progress. You know about the Hygeia trial and why the bedtime medication conversation is worth initiating. You know what properly prepared hibiscus can and cannot do. And you know how to make it correctly. You know what licorice root is doing to your cortisol levels while you sleep. You know what the alcohol rebound looks like at 3 in the morning and why it matters more than the initial sedative effect. That knowledge has specific, actionable value. It gives you a concrete list, a specific set of conversations, and a clear clinical picture of what questions have been left unanswered in the routine care you've been receiving. Your heart has been working without pause, without complaint, without ever asking for acknowledgement, every hour of every night for every decade of your life. The minimum it deserves is for you to walk into one appointment this year better prepared than you walked into the last one. That's the whole point of everything we covered today. Walk in with your list. Walk in knowing exactly what to ask for. Walk in understanding what good care for the overnight hours actually looks like. And if this gave you something useful, share it. Not as a social media gesture, but because someone in your life is carrying this risk right now without knowing what questions to ask. A spouse, a sibling, a parent. Send it to one person who's over 60. That share might be the bridge between a conversation that never happened and a test that changes everything. I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourself, and take care of the people who count on you to pay attention.